Welcome to SPAN. Welcome to SPAN. Seems like we were just here, doesn't it? My name is Mark Davis, and I'm honored to be this year's president of SPAN. I work at D.A. Davidson Trust Company on the trust team, and I'm just thrilled today that we have such a great group. We have 33 people that have never been to SPAN. You know who you are. So we'd like to recognize you. If you could please stand if you've never been to SPAN and let us recognize you. Thank you. We hope you'll be back later in the year. We're having another session of SPAN this year still, and it's with the right family. We do not have the date set. It'll probably be between Thanksgiving and Christmas, though, during the holidays. So stay tuned for that. For those of you that have not been to SPAN, we have a sequence of events. Of course, our first event is the conversation. And during the conversation, we do not serve lunch. We serve lunch during the table discussion. So you can enjoy your salads and rolls during the conversation. But Joe Ottinger will be leading the conversation today with Patty and Steve Fleischmann. We're thrilled to have them with us today. And afterwards, we have the table discussion. And the table discussion revolves around a table captain. So at every table, we need to have a table captain. So raise your hand, please, if you're a table captain. Uh-oh, we might be missing a table captain over. Oh, good. Okay, we got everybody. Be sure to listen to what the table captain's doing if you're not sure what to do, because they do. Okay, and during the discussion, we will learn what we learned today in our mission of SPAN, which is to learn firsthand from philanthropists what we can do as advisors to help them greater impact in their philanthropy. So that's really the mission of SPAN, and it's been the mission since the beginning, and it has not changed. Without our sponsors, we would not have SPAN. And we're very fortunate today to have a new sponsor of SPAN from our last meeting with John Meisenbaugh, which is Ernst & Young. So if I'd like to have Andrea Flores. Is Andrea here? Andrea, could you stand up and let us recognize you? Thank you. We're thrilled that Ernst & Young came on as a sponsor. Along with our other sponsors, which of course some have been with us since the beginning. And I'm going to read off our sponsors and then we'll get into the conversation. Our first sponsor is Bloodworks Northwest, Clark Nuber CPAs in Bellevue, D.A. Davidson Company, Del Prado Philanthropy Services, Ernst & Young, Evergreen Planned Giving, Filament Advisors, Goldman Sachs, Helsel Fetterman, Morgan Stanley, Pacific Continental Bank, Pratt Legacy Advisors, the Private Client Group at U.S. Bank, I got that right this time, Wellspring Group, and Whittier Trust. So if you please give all our sponsors a big hand. And now for the conversation. Joe Ottinger is going to lead the conversation today. Joe was a co-founder of SPAN. He's a best-selling author on books regarding legacy, and is founder and CEO of I Innovate. And he's going to introduce Patty and Steve Fleischmann. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, this is a really unique experience for me, and I'm very excited because I'm interviewing two of my very, very best friends, and I've known them for a very long time, and I've seen them as they have grown as individuals, have taken on challenges in their life, have then rose to be leaders in different areas in the community. And they've also become experts in areas that I think everybody here would be interested in. And two of those areas, which we're going to dig into, one is how do you put together a great nonprofit board? And how do you make it work for you in a way that accomplishes your goals? And the other is how do you raise money for a nonprofit organization? So as we go through and listen to their life story, those are two areas that we're gonna focus in on. But first, just a little background. Steve is chairman of Fleischmann Capital, which invests in venture capital, real estate, and the equity markets. He serves on numerous nonprofit and for-profit boards, including the Institute for Prostate Cancer Research, Talent Private Capital, Pop Gourmet Foods, and the UW Foundation. He's also a prostate cancer survivor. And I know firsthand, as Steve was wheeled in to have his prostate cancer operation in 2003, he told his doctor that if the operation were successful, he would put on the largest fundraising breakfast in the country.
My doctor right there.
And there's Dr. Lang right there. Raise your hand. It was a perfect cue. That's okay. That same year, Steve founded the Prostate Cancer Survivors Celebration Breakfast, which has raised $9 million to date. In addition, Steve has been a Seattle philanthropic leader, having chaired 19 nonprofit events in Seattle. Patty Fleischmann is equally impressive and is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice in Seattle for 20 years. She is also the president and co-founder of Stolen Youth, an organization created in 2011 to raise awareness and support the rescue and recovery of sexually exploited children and youth. Stolen Youth is helping to fundamentally change the system for how our community supports children who are being sexually exploited by bringing together all parts of the community, including police, probation officers, judges, caseworkers, hotel owners, and schools, to work together in a seamless and consistent approach to getting girls and boys the support they need to escape exploitation and to stop them from being treated like criminals. As a result, Seattle has become the #1 model for the entire country in this area. It's a story our community should take a lot of pride in. And with that, the way the interview is going to go, I'm going to first start with Steve. And Steve is really hard to get out of his shell, and so actually, really, it's just going to be, calming him down a little bit. And then Patty, if we have any time left, we're going to go dig into Patty, and then some questions for both of them. So, Steve, welcome. It's great to have you here. Why don't you start by just telling the group, how did you first get into philanthropy?
So I was working for my father right out of college, downtown Seattle, and it was a company called American Office Equipment. And one of the line items that we sold were typewriters, among furniture, calculators, et cetera. And I was in my 20s, and I had decided, I was actually 25 to be exact, that I wanted to promote this company. And I came up with an idea to look for the fastest typist in Seattle. So I, on my own, went to all the professional firms in Seattle, the law firms and the CPA firms, and I talked them into doing a typing contest within their company, and they had to pay for this. And of course, those were all going to be proceeds that were going to go to a charity called Variety Club Children's Charities, which at the time was the largest children's charity in the United States, and all the proceeds went to Children's Hospital. Long story short, and then we had a type-off in my dad's company. I had television stations came and a lot of good promotion. But I raised $50,000, 25 years old. I'm very proud of that. And Variety Club asked me to join their board. So I was the youngest board member in the country, and I was on a board in Seattle. And of all the board members, the next one closest to my age was 50. So that was quite an experience, but it was great.
So Steve, tell us your story about having prostate cancer and how it led to you deciding to have this prostate cancer breakfast and raise money for prostate cancer research.
Well, the actual answer is quite simple. Gratitude. The gentleman that just came in last is Dr. Paul Lang. Actually, would you stand, please, Paul? I'm sorry. I need you to do that. I was indebted to him, and my family was indebted to him. And it changed everything in my life. And I figured out I knew what I was good at. When I was diagnosed with cancer and made the decision that I was going to have my prostate removed, I ended up putting on this event. But what happened was, I had come up with this idea that if I was going to get through surgery and come out on the other side, that I was going to do a payback. And again, all stretching to the word gratitude, back to Paul Lang and the UW medicine. So like literally, as Randy said, or as Joe said, as I was being wheeled into surgery, Paul Lang was on one side of me, my wife was on the other. I was pretty looped up, but I was very scared. Who isn't, right? You're about to go into surgery. But I was feeling, again, I used the word gratitude and thankful that Paul Lang, who was, and for sure was one of the top surgeons in the world, was going to be performing surgery on me. And so I said to him, as we were literally being wheeled into the operating room, I said, I get, you know, after this, I make it through this, I'm gonna do a breakfast for you. And I swear to God, he thought I meant I'm gonna take him to breakfast, which is literally a fact. So I ended up, after the recovery, I called him and I said, Paul, I am now gonna do this breakfast event. And that is how I came up with the idea for the Survivor Celebration Prostate Cancer Region.
So part of what you have done to give back is if anybody wants to call you or reach out to you by email who's gotten the word that they just had prostate cancer, you take those calls and you help them out. Tell us a little about those type of calls and how you help people who have just got the word.
So I, since 2004, have been on the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance website, which is in the United States one of the top 3 websites that people go to for all types of cancer. And if you go to prostate cancer, I'm the feature story. And I was very open about my situation, and they wrote out my situation about what I went through. And I had prostate cancer at a very young age, 47. Only 10% of the men that get prostate cancer are under the age of 50. And in that storyline on the website, I put my email address. And I started getting between 1 and 2 emails a week, which, fast forward till this is 2017, I still get between 1 and 2 emails a week. And these are men that are diagnosed with prostate cancer, and I'll just kind of say one thing quickly. I've had my cancer back a few times, so I've now got, in the storyline on the website, reoccurrences, so I'm getting phone calls now from men that not only get prostate cancer, but have had reoccurrences. But I make them my priority. I drop everything. I mean, you can ask my wife. I don't care where we are, I don't care where we're traveling in the world. When I get an email from someone, within 1 hour, I get back to them. I know these are men that are scared. These are men that don't know what to do, they don't know where to go. Going on the internet, it's information overload. And I make them my priority. And it is a commitment that I will do for sure for the rest of my life. But I want to tell just one story that comes to mind. And it wasn't that long ago. And Paul, you'll remember this very clearly. There was a man that got a hold of me in his early 50s that had not kept up on his checkups. And he ended up going in and having a biopsy done on his prostate. And fast forward, he ended up having late-stage prostate cancer, early 50s. And what that means is the cancer had already spread to his spine. And in prostate cancer, what that means is you're going to die, or chances are that's the last stage. So can you imagine what this man was going through? And I was his first phone call. He lived in Oregon in a small town. He was telling me about who his doctor was, because I have a whole series of questions I ask these people, but bottom line is he was not getting the right treatment. So I immediately turned him over to Paul Lang, and my payback in helping the UW, excuse me, my payback and my only payback in helping the UW raise all this money is that they're there for when I send people their way to get back to them right away and help them. Because we all know one of the biggest problems in our medical system is you don't necessarily get in to see a great doctor, and you sure don't get a return phone call fairly quickly. So I just, again, know where these guys are coming from. I feel them. I feel their emotion. And this is, again, a lifelong commitment that I'm going to make. And this man ended up getting treated at UW, and I can honestly say that it saved his life. So.
So Steve, I'd like to go into a little bit of detail on fundraising and putting on an event. You've put on and chaired 19 events. I've been at every prostate cancer breakfast event. It's one of the events that I actually look forward to. And going is more than just to sit and see something. It's really, really done to the best possible degree. So can you tell us your formula for raising money? Because for most people, it's really, really a difficult thing.
Well, first of all, you want to fill the, excuse me, if you don't mind me just I'm choking up. First of all, you want to fill the room. So when I did this prostate cancer breakfast the first time, it had never been done before. And we all know the last thing we want to do is go to another event. And I had really high aspirations. And somebody that's close to my heart that I love dearly taught me this saying a long time ago, that if you're going to think big, think bigger. So I knew I wanted to have 800 people and I wanted to raise $1 million. And again, this event had never happened. So how am I going to fill this room? So I'll use this particular event as an example. I came up with the idea that I go, okay, well, how are you going to get people to come that are tired of going to events? So I went out to the community, and I found community leaders that I knew had a great outreach that had prostate cancer. And one by one, I asked them if they would be a table captain at my event, knowing that who's going to say no to them, knowing that they have cancer or have had cancer, their family and friends, there's no way they'd say no. And by going to community leaders, I knew that they would then have the wherewithal to find people. That leads me really to my next piece of that is audience development. You want to get the right people to come to the event. Now, of course, you want everyone to be able to come to an event. That's what that's a human thing to want, is everyone to come. But the truth is, if you're putting these fundraisers on, it's about raising money. You want to raise awareness, you want to educate, you want people to be more connected to the cause, but you want to raise money. Well, to raise money, you got to have the right people in the room that have the ability to write a nice check. So I look at that as the second, of course, an important piece. And the final thing is the event itself. It's got to be a great event. And one of the things I'm most proud about is I put my heart and soul into every event I've ever touched. But of course, this one's closest to my heart. What makes a great event? What makes a great event is, in my case, I have it be 1 hour. That's it. I choose, in this particular case, to have it done in the morning. So it's a breakfast, because I feel people are mostly in their heart at that time. They haven't gotten busy in their day. I want it to be heartfelt, and I want the entire event to stay right-brained. In fact, when I start this event off, the first thing I say, it's kind of my mantra, because I've done this event 5 times, so I do it each time. I ask everyone to please turn off their cell phones, to get in their, to be in their heart, not in their head. So it's all about feeling from the soul. And let's face it, in life, it's always all about feeling. And so I just try to create these events that people feel connected. They feel they're part of the community in that experience, and that they leave, and my hope is that they feel it was one of the best events they've ever gone to.
And let me just, a follow-up question. You've gotten corporate sponsorship too, and so I believe every dollar actually goes to the cause. How have you thought about corporate sponsors?
Well, listen, let's face it, getting money in is always the hardest thing, and the more you do the same event, the easier it gets. But let's take this particular one, first time out. It's hard. But what you have to do is you got to first, for any of you that are going to put on events or you're involved with events, you got to believe in yourself. You just have to believe in yourself, and you got to have such a commitment to the cause that without being aggressive, because I'm not, it's about being a believer, that you go after these companies and you try to get them to understand. And when they feel your own passion, you typically have a better odd that they're going to give money. And of course, in this case, it's not, I might go after companies that I know the CEO had prostate cancer, because that makes it a lot easier, or a CFO, or somebody that's in a higher position. But it is, again, the hardest thing is getting corporate money, because everybody wants a piece of that. But you got to just put your heart and soul out there. And I believe that's how we have always raised a lot of money from our underwriting standpoint.
And you don't mind doing the ask. And I remember you telling me a story. You were walking through some restaurant, and I think it was Bill Gates was there, and he was eating dinner, and you went up to the table and you go, "Hey, Bill," I don't know if you even knew Bill, and, "would you mind coming to my prostate cancer breakfast?"
I'd like to tell that story, and I'll make it quick.
All right, go ahead.
It will only take me 20 minutes, I promise. And I won't bring up the veal parmesan, but because it was at Carmine's. I was having dinner, and my event was the next morning. And this was, again, the very first time I had done this event. And I just was a believer. And I went up to Bill Gates Sr. and his wife, Mimi. They were having dinner. I went up and introduced myself. I said, "Hello, my name is Steve Fleischmann. You don't know me. Do you mind if I talk to you for a moment?" And they were a bit shocked, but I was nice about it, and they said, "Sure." And I said, "I just want you to know I'm a prostate cancer survivor, and tomorrow morning, and I know it's tomorrow morning, I'm putting on a prostate cancer breakfast at the Sheraton. And it would mean everything to me if you guys would come. And I know I'm asking you the night before." And they both showed up.
There's some lesson in that, really. Last question for Steve, and then we'll get to Patty. This has been a long journey for you with having cancer. And the question is, how has this journey changed you?
And this is a long answer, so I will try to make it short. I was diagnosed in 2003. I've had cancer 4 times, 3 reoccurrences. I am not the same person I was 14 years ago. That is for sure. I was awakened. In fact, I counsel men when I talk to them weekly, and I say that if you don't realize the best thing that ever happened to you was getting cancer, you missed the boat. Because it was the best thing that ever happened to me. For the reasons I'm going to state, I changed my priorities. I looked at life much different. I really started realizing, hey, I'm going down the path of accumulation, of building, outward focused. I was losing track of myself. I was losing track of my family. I wasn't paying attention to the things that make me feel good. And this was such an awakening that I said, I'm going to start shifting the way I think and the way I feel and the way I'm going to commit my time to my kids, who were very young at the time, and of course to my beautiful wife, Patty. And a couple of things that we did just to show you how I made such a change is I got my cancer back in 2007, and it was a shock. And I was young, and they had told me, because I got it when I was very young to begin with, odds are I'm going to have to deal with it in my life. In 2008, I took our family. My daughter, Hannah, who's here, was 9 at the time. My son, who is here, was 6 at the time, Jack and Hannah. And we went around the world for 8 months. I had a CEO running my company. We left early 2008. And if you remember, 2008 was the worst economy we had ever had since the Great Depression. We were in 22 countries. We were never in one place more than 2 to 3 days. This is for 8 months. And 3/4 of the countries we went to were third world countries, which we did on purpose. So not only Patty and I could feel the essence of life and really feel what's going on in the world, but we wanted our kids to be exposed to that. My financial situation was a disaster while we were gone. My company was slowly going downhill, really. And my stock portfolio, I don't even want to bring it up. It was a nightmare. But I got to tell you, I didn't care. I had never been so happy in my life. While we were on that trip, and I'll conclude on this, is that Patty and I had been talking. I owned my company for a long time. We made the decision to sell it. 2010, I sold my company. And at that time, we'd also made the decision to move overseas, and in 2012, we lived in Florence, Italy for a year. And my kids went to the international school, and my point about saying this was for a year, I was with my family every single day. So when it comes down to our life, what's most important? Being joyful, being positive, being an influence on other people by your attitude, being a leader that way, helping them to see what's important, feeling your soul. And I would say that's how I've changed. So,
Thank you. So first, a pitch for Patty, the best psychologist in all of Seattle. If you need to talk to somebody, here she is. But
I'm booked.
as Patty was just going along and raising her kids and having her business, you got moved, and you got moved by child trafficking. So, of all the causes that are out there, can you tell us how you got involved and what moved you to get involved?
Yeah, do I need this? Yeah. So I think inherent in my growing up in California were stories of survival and rescue. My father, who's still alive, is a Holocaust survivor. He was pulled off of a train on its way to Auschwitz and rescued and hidden with a Catholic family in a small town outside of the concentration camp. And so my whole growing up was hearing these stories of how he survived. And I think it influenced me in a very deep way to help people. I think it contributed to me wanting to be a therapist. Specifically to child trafficking, I was introduced to a film called Sold, produced by Jane Charles, one of our board members. And it was the story of a young girl trafficked out of her small village in Nepal into the brothels of India. And I was horrified, as anyone would be, hearing these stories about what happens over there. And I decided to go to India a couple of times and do some research and immerse myself in the situation over there, and learned about what was happening in the brothels and just the horrific nature of it all and what the organizations were doing on the ground over there. But I realized that I couldn't just stay in the global issue of trafficking. I had to understand what was going on here in Seattle. So came home from that trip and surrounded myself with like-minded people, two of whom are in the room today, Jennifer Reedman and Paula Clapp. Founders and board members, and we decided to do the research, and we dropped down into this issue here and found out that it was very prevalent and a very serious issue, and the average age was 12 to 13 years for these girls and boys, and what was being done in our city. I remember hearing a story of a 15-year-old girl, intact family, because I know we all think it happens to maybe homeless youth, foster care, vulnerable children anywhere. But this was an intact family. Brother was away at college. This child had got a bad grade on a test and thought her father would be mad at her, and she wrote a note saying, "I'm really sorry, I'm running away for the night." She was 14 or 15. And she was caught by a trafficker, and she was trafficked across state lines to California. And for 108 days, she was bought and sold online on Backpage before she was rescued. So that moved me as a mother, you might imagine, as a therapist, and certainly as a humanitarian. I couldn't look away.
And then how did that lead to the founding of Stolen Youth? What was it in the local community? What was the gap that you saw that you could fill?
Well, as any nonprofit, the trajectory of building a nonprofit, you learn a lot along the way because you really don't, I didn't really know enough. But we were determined, the founders, we were determined to build a house. We thought the house was the answer, and we gathered architects and designers and landscape people and yoga instructors and art therapists and chemical dependency counselors and trauma-based therapists. And we had what we thought was a good program to solve this problem here in Seattle. And we called a meeting together, about 25 stakeholders in the field. And I walked in with the drawings of the house. It was actually a house I saw in Madrona. And I thought it would be perfect. It was on the bus line. It was awful. It would have been great. But I presented this to the group, and I remember feeling very brave to do this, but I was also determined. And in the middle of my presentation, Melinda Giovango, who is the executive director of Youth Care, which is the homeless youth organization doing the work here in Seattle, stopped me in the middle of my presentation and said, Patty, that's great. We love your passion, and we appreciate you want to do right by these kids, but that's not what we need. And I said, really? And she said, yeah, what we really need is services. We need therapists, we need job training, we need education, we need advocates to reach these kids out in the streets to bring them to the services. We are losing funding. We need a safety net. And so that's what we did. We went back, we regrouped, we course corrected, and decided we would become a nonprofit to raise funds and awareness for the commercially sexually exploited youth in our community. And that's how it started.
So one of the keys to success of Stolen Youth, which has grown exponentially, has been putting together such an incredibly high-functioning board with great people who are advocates and ambassadors and helping strategists and helping you really, the whole group, make the vision a reality. And you've learned a ton from that. So I think it'd be really interesting for the group to just share some of the lessons learned in putting boards together, managing boards, motivating, et cetera.
Did you say I was an expert?
You are the foremost expert.
I'm not, but thank you for saying that. I had no experience putting a board together, absolutely. I was on an advisory board for a school many years ago. That was the extent of my experience, and I didn't enjoy it that much, to be honest. And but what I knew instinctually, I think, is what's important here. I knew that I wanted to create a heart-driven board. I wanted board members to be connected to the issue, passionate about the issue, board members that wanted to work hard, because for many years, up until this year, we have our first executive director, Nicole DiCario, who's in the room, and Rachel, who is our program coordinator. We didn't have any staff, or an office. So we were going to work very hard to bring this organization forward and break through. One of the biggest challenges we had as a board is to break through the denial in our community that this was actually going on, because I'm sure some of you who don't know about this issue here in this audience are saying to yourself, here in Seattle, that's what we said, and that's what every year when we have our fundraisers, the audience members say, is they just can't believe it. So I needed heart-driven, compassionate, passionate, hardworking individuals, and of course community outreach and development and all of that. It takes a lot to ask for money for something that no one knows anything about. And really, we weren't sure where we were going to go with this. I would have had no idea that we'd land where we are today. We do something very unique in our board meetings. We start them off with a meditation or an inspiration, and we trade off. Somebody brings that in, and it helps us drop down to feel the issue. We're one step removed. And so it keeps us connected to the issue and to each other. And that's been a really profound experience for all of us. And then we can get to the work at hand. One of our founding members, Ginny Meisenbaugh, who is not here today, but with us in spirit, suggested early on that we bring an expert into every board meeting. Because we're one step removed, we're the funding organization, we're not on the ground seeing these kids or hearing their stories all the time. So we brought experts in, and one of the earliest ones we heard from was Leslie Briner, who's the commercially sexually exploited expert, actually I think in the country, and she's housed here. And she came in to talk to us about grooming. And what that is what the predators, the pimps, do to lure these kids into the life of prostitution. And it's highly sophisticated and terrifying when you really understand it. They look for these vulnerabilities. Like I said, it could be abuse in their home, a child having run away from home, foster care, but also just by the nature of the average age of 12 or 13, there's an insecurity developmentally for kids that we know about where they're susceptible. And these predators are highly sophisticated, and they pretend that they are their best friend, the person that will love them, the person that will take care of them. I just heard a story 3 days ago. Nicole and I were meeting with Judge Barbara Mack, who used to sit on the children's court, and she was telling us the story of a judge, colleague of hers, whose daughter was groomed online for 6 to 9 months, pretending he was her friend, and then her boyfriend, and then the person that would take care of her, and she was susceptible for whatever reasons. It doesn't matter. And they met, and then she was trafficked and sold into that life. So I've learned a lot about what it takes to do this work, and from the experts.
So you talk about experts. We have a lot of professionals in the room, legal and accounting and others, and financial. How did you, along the way, use professionals? Where did you use professionals?
Well, I have to say, the first advisor and professional I used was my husband, Steve Fleischmann. He is the expert in fundraising, and I knew that to be true, and I'm sure all of you who are married or have partners know that you don't listen to everything your partner says. But in this case, I actually hung on his every word for the first 2 years about how to raise money, about how to do a successful fundraiser, about how to drive it home with heart and get people connected to the issue, even though it's hard to take it in. And he taught me everything I know, and then I taught it to my board members and to our partners. And so I'm forever grateful for my first advisor, my husband. And then I've had so many along the way that are in this room today, corporate board members, corporate heads, nonprofit founders and board members and attorneys. And I think a strength of mine, is that I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses. And I'm not afraid to ask for help. In fact, I sort of thrive in that environment of collaboration. I know it when I'm in the presence of it, but I sometimes need to do a lot of digging to know I'm there, that I've arrived with where we need to be.
So last question for Patty, and then I'll open it up to the audience. I know you would say you've grown a lot through leading Stolen Youth and taking a leadership role in the community in that way. So how has this leadership changed you as a person?
Well, as you know, as my friend, it's changed me a lot. I think I'm rather fearless now. When you become the face of an issue like this, you have to be. And starting out, I knew I was driven. I work really hard. My family's really important to me. My work was very important to me. But I think a little bit of, being naive was helpful in the beginning. I could have never known where it was going to go. But I had the tenacity and I had the capacity to move this thing forward. And I guess I didn't really know that, and now I do. And so I feel really confident about that. And I think to just say to this audience, one of the things I really listen to now are these murmurings, I call them, just these ideas that you have that you want to do something, you have a legacy, you have a passion about something. And I would say listen to those murmurings. And what I did was I just put one foot in front of the other and kept forging ahead and not listening to the naysayers, the people that said, oh, you can't do that. I remember Steve saying, I think you can have, easily 700 people in the room and raise over $700,000. And our board was, we don't think so. No one knows about this. And sure enough, our first year, that's what we did. And we had 700 people, and we raised over $700,000. And this last luncheon was in April. We raised $1 million and had close to 1,000 people in the room. So the 5 luncheons, we just keep increasing what we're doing. The other piece that I've learned that I think is important, an important concept to everybody is that, and I do this in my practice, and now I'm recognizing I do it as the president of this board, is holding 2 things at the same time. So as dark as this issue is, and as horrific and sad and at times seemingly hopeless, I hold at the same time this idea that we can make great change, and we have disrupted the marketplace, we have made change. And to hold those 2 things at the same time is a really key component in my growth and my change. And this is the last story. I recognized this recently in our survivor that spoke at our luncheon. I know some of you were there, but she was rehearsing, and she had never told her story on stage before. And she was rehearsing the night before, and I was watching her, and she was very weepy and very shaky. And as a therapist, I was nervous because I was thinking about secondary trauma. As a mother, my heart was breaking. And so I went up to her, and I just said, you do not need to do this. You've done enough. Look at you. You're here at the Sheraton, where a lot of her trauma occurred. I'm not calling out the Sheraton, all hotels, just a hotel. And it's okay. We believe in you, and we appreciate you coming this far. And she looked at me with her big eyes, and she just said, no, I have to do this. I want to do this. I don't want this to happen to another little girl. And so in that moment, I realized she was using the same process of holding her trauma that she lives with day in and day out. We can never understand that. At the same time that she wanted to help other kids and raise awareness. And so I think it's an important skill for everybody to understand.
Thank you, Patty. All right, well, with that, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for telling your story.